I'd now like to introduce our two speakers. We'll be hearing from Jennifer Wise, Mobile Marketing Analyst at Forrester Research. Jennifer will be sharing with us the latest research in mobile consumer behavior. Then we'll be hearing from Kurt Hawks, General Manager of Conversant Mobile. Kurt will be sharing his best practices in user-to-device mapping and how to develop a person-first mobile data strategy. So now I'll let Jennifer kick off our presentation and switch controls over to her.
Okay, great, thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Jenny Wise, Mobile Marketing Analyst at Forrester Research, as was introduced. And so what I do in my job is I spend a lot of time thinking about the consumer. What are they doing on mobile? What devices do they own? How are they using them? And then how can brands and companies leverage that interaction to better connect with their consumer? So we have a full agenda today. And I'm going to start by introducing just how connected is today's consumer. So we'll look at some of our latest data about device adoption and behavior. Then we'll look at how are advertisers responding to this connected consumer today, and how can they successfully craft a successful mobile strategy to reach this perpetually connected consumer. So we'll start with the consumer. Today's consumer is perpetually connected. And I love this slide because when I look around the world around me when I'm out, this is what you see. Everyone is staring at their phones. In fact, I take the train to commute in the morning, and I did an audit today to see just how connected everyone was, and I counted 2 people on the entire full train that were not looking at their phones. And I'm sure many of you have had similar experiences as well. So what we notice is that there's really this shift in attention to phones today. People are engrossed in the content on their mobile devices. And as marketers, what you want to do is get in front of that consumer where they're spending their time. And so we're seeing marketers' attention shift to mobile as well. So first, let's look at just how connected are these customers. Well, we know that mobile devices are skyrocketing. They are owning more mobile devices than ever. At Forrester, each year we produce a forecast of mobile device adoption based on market factors, what we're seeing in the industry. And as you can see, just from 2 years ago, by 2018, we expect the number of tablets and smartphones worldwide to almost triple. Smartphone adoption was at about 1 billion in 2012. Today it has surpassed 2 billion worldwide, and we project that it's going to be over 3 billion by 2018. And we're seeing tablet adoption grow as well. So we know that the consumer today is mobilely connected. They own these devices. But it's important that they don't just own these devices. They are using them to connect, and mobile touchpoints are growing. So we asked these consumers who personally use a smartphone, how often do you access the internet on a smartphone? And then also, how often do you use applications on your smartphones? Because when we think about mobile, there are 2 very distinct environments in which you can reach this consumer. And what did we see? Well, on the left here, we can see that more than 81% of consumers are accessing the internet on their smartphone at least daily. More than half are doing so several times a day. And when we ask about application use as well, we see that more than half are going online daily, with a third firing up their applications several times a day. So we have this consumer who owns mobile devices, is using them to connect both in the web and app environment. And importantly, no location is off limits. So as we know, when your consumer is using a tablet or when they're on their desktop or laptop, they're primarily using that device when they are within the home. But one thing specifically about the cell phone is that it's everywhere the consumer is. So when we ask cell phone users, where do you use each of the following devices to access the internet? Yes, we see that they're using this device while they're in the home. More than 2/3 are going online in their living room, more than half in their bedroom. But that many are also going online everywhere else too. So 64% are accessing the internet from their phone while they're in the car. A statistic that always makes me a little nervous because I hope that they are not the driver, that they're the passenger in the car. And then they're also accessing them outside of the home. So 64% are going online while they're outdoors, 62% while they're in your store. So we have this consumer now who owns mobile devices, is connecting frequently, and doing so from every location. But it's important to realize that mobile isn't the whole story. Mobile is not acting alone. Because we find when we look at the data that mobile hasn't displaced all of the other devices, rather it's additive. So here we surveyed U.S. online adults who go online weekly or more, and we asked them which of the following devices do they use, so not just own, but are actively using. And we see that the majority are using cell phones, but also 71% have a laptop, 63% a desktop, and 40%, a growing percentage, a tablet. So these customers aren't just focusing on their mobile device, they have many devices to choose from, and they're using them all. So we see that they're using these devices simultaneously. So here we asked consumers, thinking about the last time you used more than one of these devices at the same time, which did you use? And as you can see, more than a quarter of consumers have multitasked using each of these devices that we've asked about, but especially the TV, the laptop, and the cell phone. They're looking at one of those screens. There's likely going to be another screen that they're interacting with and seeing at the same time. And they also use these devices sequentially, so they're hopping from one device to another. So here with this data, we asked our consumers, please think of the last time that you switched devices. So when they were completing one given task, they had identified that they'd switched devices during that journey. And we asked them, which device did you start with? And so here you can see the beginning of that journey. So 28% had started something on their cell phone and then switched to another device to finish that task or to look at more information. We also see that switching starting from other devices too. 1 in 5 started on a laptop and then picked up that behavior or task on another device as well. So it's important to realize that when we think of this consumer, we know that they have a lot of different devices. We know that they're connecting through all of them, all of the time, but it's much more than just a shift in their attention to different screens. They've actually gone through something that we call the mobile mind shift. Now, the mobile mind shift is this. It's defined as the expectation that I can get what I want in my immediate context and moments of need. So consumers today, and I'm sure many of us are among these, expect to be able to turn to any device that they want at any single time to complete any information need or service that they desire. So what we have today isn't just this consumer who's just consuming content or shifting between devices. They have these expectations. They're turning to a device, and they're expecting and demanding a high level of service and interaction and for the content that they're looking for to be there. So if we have this consumer who's perpetually connected, very demanding of their experiences across all screens, how do we find that advertisers are responding to this today? The good news is that we see that advertisers are following their consumer. So through all of these digital touch points that consumers have amassed, there's a rise of digital inventory. A lot of time is being spent on all of these screens. And so what that's done is it means that marketers have to upgrade their planning and media buying approaches to reach their consumer and execute cross-screen. So what are they doing with the numbers? So we see that they're responding to this increase in digital time by increasing their online advertising budgets. So here is Forrester's forecast of what people are spending on online advertising today and what we project they'll be spending by 2019. And as you can see, the number is going to almost double, and it'll be growing at a rate of 11% a year. But more importantly there, when we're thinking about the different devices, is that mobile is a key driver of this growth in the market. In fact, it's worth calling out that mobile is going to account for 66% of the growth of digital marketing spend over the next 5 years. Today, when we count smartphones and tablets together, they represent about 24% of the display market, and that's going to grow by 39% to represent more than a third by 2019 of the market. So they're shifting their budgets online, and they're also shifting their budgets to mobile. And they're beginning to operationalize this too and really put some strategy behind their buys. So here we surveyed marketers who had indicated that they'd done programmatic buying in the past year. And we asked them, in what media have you done this programmatic buying? And as we can see, online display is still the primary media. 77% have bought online display programmatically. Primarily, we're talking about desktop there. But we're beginning to see these shifts to other screens too. So more than a third had bought mobile inventory programmatically. 13% are taking advantage of the addressable TV opportunity and had bought TV programmatically as well. And so we're beginning to not just see this investment in digital grow, but also their investment in different screens to reach this perpetually connected consumer. But while this is all good news, exciting to see, marketers still need help connecting the dots. So let's see what they told us. So we know that your consumer has gone through this mobile mind shift, right? That they expect any information or service available on any device that they want at any time. And so here's a sample of what this looks like in practice. So what we've done is in our research looked at the primary devices that travelers use at different stages of their customer journey. So as they go from planning to purchasing, the departure, and then that experience once they're on their trip, when they return, when they start planning for the next trip. And what we're looking at on this screen are in blue are the text next to the devices and channels that are primarily used today, and gray are the emerging channels. So where we're starting to see traction in the market, and we expect in the next few years, they'll also become primary devices used at each of these stages. And as you can see, it's not one device that's used across the board. Right? People are more likely to turn to that large screen of their desktop or laptop during that planning phase or while they purchase today. But we also expect that purchasing behavior is going to begin to splinter and that all of these different channels are going to play a role. So people may be finishing their purchase on their mobile device, on their tablet, or even within an application. And then that post-purchase engagement is also going to splinter across screens as well when they're on the go and there's more opportunity to connect using your mobile device and having your laptop out, where we're going to see mobile play a key role in that departure, trip, and return experience. And then when you begin planning for that next trip, it circles back, right? You're going to go back to that larger screen, go to your tablet, or by this point maybe you're loyal and you've downloaded an application and you'll interact with the brand there. But our takeaway here is that this is one consumer at any given point can be starting their planning on their laptop, switch to their mobile device to purchase, then interact on their tablet. But this is one consumer, one brand interaction, but it's splintered across these devices. So it becomes imperative to know who this one consumer is so that you can track them as they continue, so that you can personalize your messaging, and so that you can attribute the value of each of these touch points in their customer journey. And we see that marketers know this. So we surveyed marketers who were media buyers, and we asked them a variety of questions about what do they find important when they're planning campaigns. And here we found that understanding their audience's cross-device behavior is something that's key. So we asked them, how important are the following factors in measuring campaigns across multiple media? And here we're showing those who selected an 8 or 10 on the scale from 1 to 10. And as we can see, understanding that journey is of paramount importance to these marketers. So understanding each medium's impact was the most important, cited by 78%. Understanding the path to purchase was 77%. And then to fuel this understanding of the customer and the attribution, what you have to know is who that consumer is. And so more than half of these marketers also said that identifying the individual across channels is something that is important to them. Also important to them is proving that value of their buy. It's something that's not only important, but is becoming required. So here we ask these marketers, how important are each of the following metrics to measuring the overall impact of your media efforts? And what we see is that that ROI metric, that financial value, is the most important to these marketers, cited by 82%. And then we begin to see other metrics as well, such as micro-conversions done on each of the devices, or brand metrics like awareness, purchase intent, and engagement metrics starting to rise also. But what we see here, and this is something that I hear all the time from marketers that I speak with, is that the ROI metrics are difficult to come by for mobile, because often, while it's that emerging channel that we saw in that traveler's journey when it comes to that purchase and that end transaction, it's often that starting point. Like we saw 28% of the consumers had started something on a cell phone and then transferred to another device. And so if you want to tie that back to that ROI metric, you're going to have to be able to track that consumer as they traverse the different touch points, from that initial impression to that ultimate purchase or transaction. And that is where we see some trouble from the advertisers. So connecting the dots is key, but it is not easy. So here we asked marketers who are related to their mobile strategy and services, does your firm track mobile users across other channels? And what we would want to hear is a resounding yes, so that they can do this attribution, so they can know who this consumer is and prove the value of mobile. But what we found was this, that a third of consumers don't, or marketers don't track their users across any channels or media. So they are only viewing that mobile impression in that silo and have no idea what happens with that consumer once they go to that other device. We do see that a quarter are partially tracking to online, and we only found 11% that tracked their mobile user across online and offline media. And we know that that's going to be something important, because not only do we have to track this consumer as they traverse digital channels, but also if that end transaction or conversion is going to happen offline, you're going to have to be able to enable that tracking and measurement and attribution as well. So here we can see that marketers know that their consumers on all of these different devices is investing in the advertising to reach them, but doesn't yet have that infrastructure in place to really be able to know the outcomes, to attribute the value, and to reach the consumer, which is going to be something that's key, especially as marketers need those types of metrics and attribution to make the case for mobile and to invest more heavily in it. So how can advertisers craft a successful mobile strategy? Well, first is to remember the mobile mind shift, that your consumer isn't just using the same interaction that they've always done on a different device on mobile. It's not just a shift in media. It is an entire shift in the way that they expect to find information and to interact with brands. And it's that expectation that I can get what I want in my immediate context and moments of need. And when we read this, a few things come out, right? That they have high expectations, that they expect your brand experience to be ready for them on that device, but then also that they want it in their immediate context and needs, so that they have this high expectation of relevancy and personalization also. So what do marketers have to do? They have to undergo their own mobile mind shift, and that's your brand has to deliver on your consumers' expectations in their immediate context and moments of need. So how do you do that? Well, Forrester's created something called the idea cycle, and I will walk you through these 4 steps. The first is the I, which is to identify consumer touch points and context. So what this means is, in the definition of the mobile mind shift, we know that they turn to any given device when they have a need. So it's up to the brand to map at what point do they turn to each of these different devices, where are they in the world, and what are they trying to accomplish? What was their motivation for turning to that device? Are they looking for more information? Are they doing research on their desktop? Are they on the go, on a train, need a hands-free experience but are ready for sort of a quick hit interaction from your brand? Or are they spending all their time on a website or within mobile applications for hours a day, at which point you could take that opportunity to borrow that mobile moment from that game, for example, and infuse it with your mobile ad to reach that consumer. So the very first step is to know who is your consumer. Where are they in their customer journey? Where are they in the world, so that you can provide relevancy to them, and on what device. Then once you've mapped your customer journey and notice at what point they're using which device, the second step is to design the engagement. Now when we think about mobile, it's very different from desktop, right? You have to completely divorce that strategy when it comes to what that engagement is going to look like. So for example, when it comes to mobile advertising, we surveyed consumers and we asked them what their thoughts were about in-app ads. And what did they tell us? Well, they told us that they find them interruptive. They also saw less than 1 in 5 said that they found them in any way relevant to them. And for mobile, which is such a small screen, and the mobile moment, that moment when they turn to their mobile device and they're trying to do something, ads have the opportunity to be very interruptive. So you could be almost better off not serving that ad and creating this poor experience than delivering that ad and reaching a consumer. So what you have to do when you're designing a mobile ad engagement is to really make sure that it is going to be a good experience for that consumer, and that's going to be driven by relevancy. And so when we talk about relevancy, we mean both the targeting and the messaging of that ad. And we've outlined at Forrester 4 stages of targeting. The first is that basic targeting, which is going to be that basic demographic information, really broad reach. But for mobile, you have to move beyond that. So the next phase is that real-time targeting. So not just this is my segment, this is the demographic I want to reach, but I know that it's this hour of the day, and maybe I can send them a breakfast special instead because it's the morning, right? Or I know that they're in this location, so I'm going to include the nearest location and a click for directions in my ad. So that moves on to that real-time targeting. And then you want to move beyond that to that actual personalized one-to-one targeting, where you know who that consumer is, what their interests are, what their affinities are for, and what you can really deliver to them so that it will be relevant and they're more likely to act. And then eventually you want to get to that state where it's predictive, right? So you know so much about that consumer that you don't just know that this ad will be relevant to them in theory, but you know that it's actually relevant to their life at that moment, and it is helpful to them. So that's what you want to think about at the D, at the design that engagement for mobile. How can you create the most relevant ad possible so that they're likely to act? And next we have the E, and this is something that marketers tend not to think about, and they tend to ask their tech team to work on, which is the engineering, your platform, processes, and people. But this becomes imperative for mature marketers to think about with advertising, because with this type of sophisticated targeting, sophisticated engagement, you have to make sure that you have the right data integrated, that you have the right people internally who understand what you need to deliver on that engagement, and that also you have the right partners in place who will allow you to identify that consumer, to target them at the level necessary for mobile, and then to track. Which brings us to the A, which is analyzing results to monitor the performance and optimize your outcomes. So you can't just put the ad out there, see what happens. You really want to make sure that you're able to track that consumer, to get that attribution in place so that you can prove the ROI of that engagement, so that you know who that consumer is, so that you can continue to boost that mobile advertising budget, as well as optimize your campaigns as you go forward. And the reason why we call this the idea cycle is because then once you do the A, right, it circles back to the I. So what have you learned about that consumer? What did they respond to? And how can you continue to tailor that experience for them? And so thank you for listening to that first portion. And now I will hand it over to Kurt.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. I really appreciate that. So I'm going to jump in and start with a simple concept. So you may have heard many conversations in the mobile advertising market that are full of buzzwords like cross-device, cross-platform, cross-screen, machine learning. The list goes on and on and on. So I'm going to start someplace very simple. If you remember nothing else from this conversation, there's one key takeaway. and that is to put the person first. So it's all about reaching the consumer behind the device, all about understanding the consumer behind the device. We need a rich understanding of consumer behavior, whether we choose to reach that consumer on one device or whether we choose to reach that consumer across multiple devices. So again, overarching concept, if you remember nothing else from this discussion, it's put the person first in everything that you do. So let's back up a little bit and look at the mobile advertising market of yesterday. And there's a big sea change that has happened and continues to happen. So, yesterday it was all about simplistic targeting and competitive pricing. That's no longer sufficient. Today, it's all about a single view of a consumer with rich insights in order to truly understand that consumer and measure the impact a campaign has on a consumer versus a siloed set of devices. So again, it's all about putting the person first. Now, within this overarching takeaway of putting the person first, I'm going to go through 4 essentials for doing mobile right. The first is to get a complete view of the consumer's actions from across multiple devices. The second is to drive targeting precision by understanding you truly understand that consumer. I'll talk about this concept of 6 sides of a consumer. The third is to leverage the unique strengths of every device. And the fourth is to ensure accurate mobile and cross-device measurement and insights. So let's start with the first essential of doing mobile right, which is a complete customer view. So 60% of digital interaction time is spent on a mobile device or tablet. Further, 86% of mobile time is spent in an in-application environment. So our lives as consumers are fragmented across multiple devices. So the first question to ask when you're thinking about doing a mobile advertising campaign is, do you have access to audience data from across users' devices? If not, your starting point for a campaign, the inputs for understanding the consumer, are going to be missing anywhere from 40 to 60% of a consumer's digital life. It's kind of like walking around with an eye patch on. You can't quite see everything that's going on. So the key input to gaining a complete view of a consumer is audience data across a user's devices. So we need to tie this data across consumers' devices to a single consumer profile. And there are 2 approaches for doing that. The first is what is called the deterministic-based matching, or hard match, some people refer to it, and second is probabilistic matching. So the first, in terms of deterministic matching, that's matching a user across multiple devices using things like login or anonymous logins on different devices, or anonymous, payment information. Think about it. You log into a site or service, make a purchase on one device, log into a site or service, make a purchase on another device. There's that, account level deterministic match where that person has signed in. The other element is a probabilistic device match, and that is using different data points, different signals to try to develop a model or an algorithm to say, based on all this information, based on all these data points, I believe these 2 devices are related to the same consumer. Now, you can't develop a probabilistic model without a deterministic model. So you need to take the probabilistic approach, test it against those known matches to see whether that model is indeed working or not. So in terms of starting point for this, ask questions about how this matching is done, and does it intuitively make sense? Where does the data come from? How is it used? At what scale? Again, back up and think about it intuitively. We've developed a 2x2 matrix. In my view, life is complicated enough. If you can simplify things into a 2x2 matrix, you can do a pretty good job of developing an assessment of whether something makes sense or not. So one way to understand the market and whether a cross-device mapping approach makes sense is to think about this matrix. First, on the vertical axis, the cross-channel perspective, there's low and high. Low meaning single device set of capabilities, high meaning multi-device set of capabilities. I don't mean just the ability to serve an ad to a consumer on multiple devices. What I mean is core ownership of and expertise in each of the platforms. Mobile is still very new and emerging, requires dedicated expertise, dedicated technology, dedicated investment to truly be able to have that cross-channel perspective. The horizontal axis is quality and exclusivity of data. You'll notice on the bottom right-hand quadrant, it's marked as not applicable. So in today's environment, remember when 60% of digital interaction time is happening on a mobile device, if you only have a singular view of a consumer, or singular device view of a consumer, it is not possible to have high-quality data. It's simply not. What can you possibly know about me as a consumer because I'm using mobile application X or mobile application Y? Not a whole lot. So where you really want to be is on the upper right-hand quadrant, where you have a core ownership of and expertise in mobile, display, and video for that matter, and you have high quality and exclusive data. So third-party data could be used to round out an understanding or round out an assessment of somebody, but you need to have differentiated set of data to make sure you are indeed targeting the right sets of consumers. So a complete consumer review requires ownership of and expertise in both mobile and display, and it requires a large amount of exclusive and high-quality data. Again, the upper right-hand quadrant. So use this as a way to frame the market and assess things like cross-device matching. Does it intuitively make sense? I mentioned the concept of 6 sides of a consumer. So the second essential to doing mobile right is to drive targeting precision by ensuring you understand all 6 sides of a consumer. So the first side is what I buy as a consumer. Second side is who I am. Third side is what I care about, what are my passion points and interests. The fourth is how I connect. The fifth is what I share, the social aspect of my life. And the sixth is my relationship with a brand or set of brands. Now, I truly believe we need all 6 sides in order to understand a consumer, not just a single side or 1 or 2 sides. I'll give you some examples of what I mean in a moment. But again, the second essential is to drive targeting precision by ensuring you understand all 6 sides of a consumer. So let's dig into each one of those 6 sides. The first side is what I buy. So as a consumer, what I purchased in the past gives a great insight into what a consumer, let me back up. What I purchased in the past gives great insight into a consumer as well as a predictor of what that consumer will purchase in the future. So quite simply, purchase data drives better results. If we look at some best practices here, make sure the data is exclusive and recent. Make sure you understand where that data comes from. That data should be inclusive of mobile and online. The PC remains the digital workhorse in terms of purchases, but people are purchasing quite a bit on mobile devices as well. And key questions to ask have to do with where does the data come from? Is it first party? Is it third party? How quickly is that data updated? Is it updated in real time? What level of fidelity and detail is included in this commerce-based set of data? So think about the concept of consumers connected via commerce. It's absolutely critical to understanding of a consumer today. The second side of a consumer is quite simply who I am. So offline, I'm a male, I'm 35 to 45. That is me. That's an offline behavior, offline attribute. So previous approaches of doing things like, hey, if we see a device on sports-related content, that's a man, those things are no longer sufficient. We need to make sure that we're assembling our profiles and our understanding of a consumer starts with real anonymized sources of people, sources of data related to people and who they are. So things like householding, things like inferences based on content consumption are no longer sufficient. Make sure you understand how a particular provider understands basic things like age and gender. The third side of the consumer is to understand what I care about. So again, what are my passion points and interests? This requires a vast amount of reach across many different publishers and across many different types of content, and across many different activities for that matter. So think about on a mobile device, for example, the average number of applications a consumer has on their mobile device is 41 different applications. And if we just look at your own experience, your own behavior related to mobile, go to any of the app stores, look at the top 10, top 25 different applications today, and go there 2 weeks from now. Those top 10, top 25 will change quite dramatically. We as consumers are ingesting lots of different types of content The content is largely disposable, to put it in one way. And so that's just in a mobile environment. Think about how many websites you hit in any particular day. Think about all different activities that you may complete, not just content consumption, but things like content you interact with, videos you watch. Think about things like locations. Think about things like shopping, what you purchase. I mentioned earlier, you can't just understand a consumer from one side of that consumer. You need all six. So, example from my own life, I'm a father of 3 young children. I don't consume parenting-oriented content. If you just looked at my browsing behavior, you would have no idea that I'm a father. But if you look at my purchase activity, you know I buy a lot of things for my children. So again, even trying to understand what I care about, you need not just browsing and content consumption, you need other things like content interaction, location, shopping data. So some key things to ask when you're evaluating what you or a particular provider knows about what a consumer cares about is what are the sources of the data? At what scale? Again, I talked about that huge reach that's required to really get this understanding. Think about the recency of the data. Is it real time? We as consumers want information at our fingertips any given point in time to be able to understand what context the consumer's in based on what they've done, 3 hours ago or 3 weeks ago. We need to understand all those things. Ask what behaviors demonstrate audience relevance. What types of insights are provided to truly understand that consumer based on what that consumer cares about, and how deep are those indications of interest? Is it because I browse, one site, one automotive site, I'm in market for auto? Probably not. You need to get much deeper than that. The fourth side of a consumer is how I connect. These are things like, what types of devices do I connect with? What are my connection histories and patterns? What are the locations with which I connect? And I'll give you a simple example here. We see it in our lives every day for those of us that are either leisure travelers or business travelers. Oftentimes, if we're taking a very short trip, we'll leave our PC at home. We'll take our smartphone, take our tablet. So if you wanted to do a PC-based program or computer-based program to target business travelers, you may not really even understand if that consumer is a business traveler unless you understand the connection histories and patterns for mobile devices in addition to that PC. So I talked before, there are 2 different approaches to do this, this cross-device matching. There's the deterministic match and the probabilistic match. So of course, the deterministic matches, best practice there is to maximize the number of deterministic matches. Those are quite simply more accurate. So some things to ask about on the deterministic matching side is what's the source of the data? Again, back up and think about that 2x2 matrix that I described earlier. Does it intuitively make sense? It's very easy to take something simple and make it sound complex, but it's difficult to take something complex and make it intuitive, just make it make sense. So again, lend some critical judgment. And are there particular safeguards in place to ensure privacy and only anonymous data is used? On the probabilistic matching side, try to understand the inputs. Again, what are the sources of information that are taken into consideration to match a particular user to a number of devices? Again, back to that 2x2 matrix, does it make sense? Are the quality of the inputs there? Is the scale of the input there? Does it intuitively make sense? So focus on the inputs. What's used? Is it simply householding, two devices connect via the same Wi-Fi connection, and therefore they're related? Or is it better than that? Does it get down to the individual level? And what information is used at what scale? The fifth side of consumer is the social aspect of a consumer's life, so what I share. So quite simply, a best practice here is to combine robust profiles, incorporating the 6 sides, incorporating everything I've just talked about with the social aspect of a consumer's life. So take this robust and rich audience profile, combine it with the social aspect of Facebook and Twitter, for example, and really accelerate your path to not only understanding what a consumer shares, but reaching them at the appropriate points in time. So some things to ask, again, what information is used in social distribution, social advertising? Is it just the social data, or is it the robust understanding of 6 sides of a consumer? And can I deliver ads on both Facebook and Twitter? Where are these ads actually delivered? The sixth side of a consumer is a relationship with a brand or particular brands. So we all know each time we hit a brand's website, each time we place a call to the call center, each time we receive an email from a brand, each time we walk into a particular retail location or make an offline purchase, there's some kind of relationship that's hopefully being reinforced with that brand. So it's really critical to ingest all different types of data. So site purchases, site browsing, CRM, email data, direct mail, catalog data, call center, offline data. 92% of, I think it's 90% of purchases are actually made offline. So this online-offline view of a consumer is absolutely critical. So leverage data about brand relationships as much as possible, and some key questions to ask are, what are the sources and types of data that are used? And what safeguards are in place to ensure data is anonymous? Your data is extremely valuable. If you're going to share your data or combine your data with somebody else, you need to make sure there are the appropriate safeguards, appropriate practices, appropriate policies in place to make sure that your data is A, anonymized, B, your data is protected. But leveraging all this data is very valuable to understanding a consumer. So to summarize, when we talk about the 6 sides of a consumer, it's really important to think about all 6 sides. And the next essential for doing mobile advertising right is to leverage the device strengths. So capitalize on the unique strengths of each device when developing your creative and media strategies. Think about how you as consumers interact with media and interact with different devices. So I mentioned earlier that PC remains the digital workhorse in terms of data entry and transactions. The tablet is a great media consumption mechanism. Think about over the last few years, it's gone from the huge, bigger and bigger flat screen TV on your wall to you're sitting on your couch, sitting in your bed, consuming content on your tablet. So great content consumption device. If we think about a smartphone, always with us. The last thing we look at night before we go to bed, first thing we look at in the morning. We'd rather leave our keys, our wallet, our kids, for that matter, at home. That we need to have and we want to have our mobile devices with us at all times. So private and personal. Ability to deliver a branded experience in the palm of a consumer's hand. So again, capitalize on unique strengths of each device when developing creative and media strategies. So the fourth essential for doing mobile right is measurement that's focused on the impact the campaign has on a consumer, not just a siloed set of devices. Jenny mentioned earlier a consumer that may start an activity on one device, jump across multiple devices, and ultimately complete that activity on another device. That is absolutely critical to reflect into marketing plans. So how do you do this? Well, A, I'm sure many people here have heard the concept of cookies don't work in mobile. The traditional sense of a cookie does not work in mobile. So traditional cookie-based attribution models and methods simply don't work. I mentioned huge amount of time that consumers are spending in the in-application environment. So in that in-application environment, you need to be able to understand what the consumer is doing in the application. You need to be able to understand what the consumer is doing across multiple applications. And finally, this notion of cross-device effects. You need to understand if you serve an ad to a consumer on a mobile device, and that consumer then converts or takes some action on the PC or on the tablet or in-store for that matter. So what we see is in order to truly understand the impact a campaign has on, you need to understand that from the consumer perspective. So again, put the consumer first. Measure the impact against a consumer set of consumers, not just a siloed set of devices. So I know there's a lot of text on this slide, but to summarize, the 4 essentials for doing mobile advertising right are to get a complete view of the consumer's action across multiple devices. 2, to really understand that consumer by understanding all 6 sides of that consumer. So what I buy, who I am, what I care about, how I connect, what I share, and my relationship with brands. 3 is to think about and leverage the unique strengths of each device. And 4 is to measure the impact the campaign has on a consumer or set of consumers, not just a siloed set of devices. So I'll come full circle, and again, if you remember nothing else from this conversation, it's to put the person first to drive better results. And this person-first understanding or understanding of a consumer across all their different devices is absolutely required if you're doing a mobile-only campaign, you're doing an online display-only campaign, a video-only campaign, or you're trying to reach a consumer across all their set of devices. So this better insight, richer profile is absolutely critical. Put the person first. I also just wanted to, before I end, I also just wanted to offer up some additional information for you to review if you'd like to. Separated into two different categories. So one is consumer data and insights. The other one is what I call strategic ideas. These are white papers and webinar content that we wrote that are available at conversantmedia.com. You can click on Insights and Ideas, and you can feel free to download this information and review it at your leisure.